Ben, if I wanted to hear a podcast between you and Justin Koo talking about life, love, and other mysteries, where would I go to find this podcast?
You would definitely go first to the internet. If you don't know how to use the internet, you'd open your web browser, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, something of that sort.
Safari?
And then you would go to Justin Koo's Instagram, which is at @jkoo. And then there's a link. I don't know, I think.
That's probably the worst way to find the podcast, I would imagine. Like, you could do that on your phone, right?
Yeah.
These people are never going to find the podcast, and that's cool because that means you probably won't get canceled because no one's going to listen.
It's crazy is that all three of us do podcasts and we can't figure out what to say.
Well, hey guys, this has been very helpful. I'm excited to listen to the Dusty Boys podcast. Count me in.
Hey, you guys. Welcome back to Worthy of Everything with me, Jadra Lazo, and my partner, Michaela Hoffman. We're going to be interviewing Mr. Russ Palmer today, and we are so excited. The topic we're going to be talking about is health when we're walking with Jesus and what that looks like. Russ has this incredible story of how Jesus freed him from food addiction, and he had a miracle in his life, actually, where at the age of 36, he had a heart attack, which is crazy, right? But through this miracle, Russ, you started to understand your identity in Christ and what it means to truly walk out freedom from sin. And a huge part of his identity crisis had to do with a very serious food addiction, which is why he was having a heart attack at 36 years old. I believe that his testimony and just experience is going to be so enlightening and gives so much hope to anyone that's ever really struggled with any addiction, I believe. So welcome, Russ. We're so glad you're here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Told God I would never, ever say no to an opportunity to share what he's done for me to free me from this addiction.
Praise the Lord.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Michaela and I have both had a history. Mine started when I was a little girl with living in a stressful environment, and I definitely turned to food for pleasure. And I know Michaela has a similar story. Yeah, so Russ, I think just share this amazing story. After you got saved from a heart attack, God did an incredible miracle. How did you learn to walk out health and have a healthy relationship with food after coming to understand God's deep love for you and the power of the Holy Spirit working in your life?
Yeah, it unfortunately did not happen right away after the heart attack because that food addiction was embedded so deep because it had started back in 2009 when I was working as a dean at Auburn Academy, and that food addiction that began out of scarcity, really, that scarcity mindset. So even though I knew that God had just delivered me from a heart attack and there was this amazing miracle, I had a 3% chance to live, and he made a way. My largest artery in my heart was 100% blocked, and I went 40 minutes with no blood flow to anywhere in my body.
That's crazy.
And including my brain, there was no blood flow, and I never even passed out. I never had a stroke. I never lost consciousness. So I knew there was this incredible miracle that God made a way, and he's the way maker, and when there was no way. And then the spotlight was on me. Like, doctors were coming in the room and saying, "We never meet anyone like you. Like, we meet their widows." And I remember cardiac nurses coming in the room to greet Sarah, the widow. They were coming in saying, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And Sarah was like, "My husband's alive. He's in the ICU," because they had looked at the echo showing the LAD 100% blocked. And when they see that, they're, 90% of the time greeting the widow. And so I knew God had spared me of this addiction, of this heart attack, but I naively thought that he had also cured me of the addiction. And I was praising him of that too. But I remember as they transferred me from ICU to the cardiac unit, I haven't shared this on social media yet, but I remember ordering horrible food off the hospital menu and like
I just had a heart attack, but can I get some cheesesteak, please?
yeah, I remember ordering like French toast and a breakfast burrito, and like my brother had come to
Wow.
see me in the cardiac unit and he was looking at the food like, is that supposed to be on your menu? And they didn't restrict it for me, and so I ordered it.
Wow. They didn't even restrict it. That's
That's not
wild.
Yeah.
normal.
That's
yeah, that's
sad.
not normal. Usually they make you do like a low sodium thing, So that's wild.
Yeah. I had French toast and a breakfast burrito, and Sarah was like, why are they letting you order this? And my brother was wondering why I had this. And so I knew God had delivered me, but I naively thought he had delivered me from the food addiction. But that food addiction was in deep. Like, I think the heart attack was easy for God to deliver me from. That was in an instant he did that.
Mm.
He saved me. But the food addiction was so deeply ingrained in me for so many years that I don't want to say harder for God, but that was going to take a longer period of time, more work on my part and more surrendering on my part
Mm.
to finally let it go and finally realize the damage it was doing and that it was killing me. So I had all this pressure on me, and then I come home, and then Sarah is terrified. And for some reason, our whole marriage, she always had this fear that I was going to have a heart attack.
Wow.
And she didn't know why. Maybe because I ate so horribly. I
Like
ate
when she met
terribly.
you were already eating horrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
And your wife is actually very healthy. She's the opposite.
she's very incredibly
Yeah.
healthy. Like, you'll hear a little bit of her story. She grew up incredibly poor, and all they had was their garden. She grew up just loving her garden and loving vegetables, and her passion is health. And she's this picture of health. And she, for our entire marriage, has watched me killing myself
Right.
with,
Knowing it.
That's hard.
and it has been the biggest fight. Some couples fight over finances. We have fought over food
Wow.
more than anything. It has been our whole marriage. It started literally on our honeymoon. We were in an all-inclusive resort, and I went insane with
Right.
the buffet
Right. That food is so good
just-
too.
because free food for me is a trigger. Buffets are a trigger. So I come home, and she's always had this fear of me having a heart attack because of the way I've eaten our whole marriage. And I've disguised it as being a foodie. For a while, I disguised it as being a social media food critic. I would post pictures of food. I disguised it just, I had about 1,000 friends on Facebook, and I would go to all the restaurants around Denver and post pictures of food and do food reviews. And I would say, oh, I've got a following, Sarah. I've got people who are depending on me to find all the best burgers in town and the best pizza, the best tacos, and all the most horrible food, the like fattiest, unhealthy food. So I disguised it as being a foodie, a food critic. It was my coping mechanism. I would stress eat a lot and so she's watched me for all these years dealing with stress, being a foodie, killing myself with food. And she's always had this fear that I was going to have a heart attack. I finally have a heart attack, and she's like crippled with fear, even though she's watched God deliver me and save my life from almost certain death. I mean, she saw me pretty much a corpse. When she walked in the door, she said my face was gray. I was lifeless on the couch. Like, she saw me almost die. She watched the miracle happen, but
She thought that was going to be your
could-
wake-up call. Like, come on,
Yeah.
hubby, I want you to live. Here's your wake-up call. You actually did almost die. And a lot of people would be motivated by that, right? To start eating healthy and to start exercising and be like, okay, I don't want to die. But what you're saying is you weren't. You went right back to eating all the junk. And so, can you give the listeners the actual picture of how you are eating? Going to the fast food restaurants, can you explain to them?
Yeah. It's really living in the flesh. I think of that verse in Philippians 3:19, my God was my stomach and my destiny was destruction. I was undoubtedly and completely living in the flesh, living in darkness and deception. And then Sarah was there trying to watch my every move because she was terrified always that I was going to have a heart attack. Then I did have a heart attack and she didn't want it to happen again. She couldn't believe I almost died. And so she wasn't even letting me have a drop of olive oil, like no oil in the house. And she emptied out pantry. She emptied out the fridge. She went crazy with health food, like vegetables were cooked in water. And so I went the opposite. Like I went worse because all the pressure was on me. Like all of a sudden, like I was this miracle and the spotlight was on me. God delivered me and I couldn't live up to it. So I went even worse than I was before. And Sarah was so terrified that I was going to die. She was watching everything I ate. So I started hiding everything from her. So I was living in deception. I was hiding food from her. So the crazy thing is, after the heart attack, people were bringing food to the house and Sarah would watch everything they brought. So there was no oil and if anyone brought anything bad, she would check them at the door. like she wouldn't let anything
no,
bad.
thank you.
But, yeah. But the lazy people would send me gift cards to DoorDash and Grubhub and Uber Eats. And so that's actually what sent me down a slippery slope. With Sarah watching so closely, after a month I had a torn Achilles also. So I tore my Achilles 4 days before the heart attack.
Oh,
so
no.
I was stuck in the house. And so Sarah was watching like every ounce of food I ate. And so I did lose 15 pounds in that first month after the heart attack. But then people started sending me these gift cards and I started ordering to the house all this horrible food. So it started with Uber Eats and DoorDash and Grubhub, all the fast foods you can imagine. And in deception because Sarah didn't know.
Which, can I say, it's just like an alcoholic. If you're addicted to drugs, like it's literally the same. If you haven't been addicted to food, you might not understand that. But the deception that the enemy puts in front of us, it looks the same. It's just a different drug.
Right. It kind of takes me back to like Adam and Eve in the garden when they hid from God. And he's like, why are you hiding from me?
Yeah. It's just like an alcoholic. If you can imagine someone overtaken and crushed by the weight of their own shame, and God wasn't shaming me.
That's right.
God doesn't shame us. The enemy was shaming me. And I felt like I had to hide all of this from Sarah. So it started with gift cards, Uber Eats, everything delivered to the house. And when I ran out of those gift cards, I started to go to fast food every single day.
Oh.
And then I went for every single meal. And I'm talking the worst fast foods. And Sarah was still cooking me healthy meals, but I would find an excuse to go out and eat more fast food. I would find an excuse, just like an alcoholic would find an excuse to go out to the bars, or I would go to the grocery store to get more unhealthy food to cook for breakfast the next day when Sarah would go to work. I was making makeshift coolers in the garage with those freezer bags with ice packs in them and hiding all the dairy and hiding all the meat in the garage. I was hiding food under the couch, and we had an ant invasion, and I was living in so much deception that I blamed that on my toddler, saying that he left cookies under the couch that it was the toddler's fault, like blaming the dog. Oh,
It's
he must have
always the
let
baby.
Oh, blame it on the dog, blame it on the toddler. And we had thousands of ants. I had left donuts under the couch. One of my old hiding places, I used to hide cookies even in the first year of our marriage. I started hiding food all over the house. I was living in deception and food addiction, but in reality, I was dying. I was hiding it from Sarah, but I was dying in deception. I was killing myself because I was living in the flesh, but the flesh always leads to death.
Mhm.
And conversely, living in the spirit always leads to life. So living in the flesh, my destiny was destruction, and my God was my stomach. And it was fast food for every single meal. And I would take the kids out, and I would use an excuse every single time I took the kids out. That was an excuse to go to fast food. But then Sarah started noticing, because I didn't have any gift cards anymore. So she started noticing all the purchases, spending money that was a ton of money on fast food. So I had to find a way to cover up that. So I started taking cash out, buying fast food in cash, and so much deception, or using credit cards. But then how am I going to pay for the credit cards? It's just the deception got so real that I started to hear one of the worst lies in my head got me to sink to the lowest. And this is how the enemy can lie to you in it when you're so deep in your addiction and so deep in deception. You can hear lies in your head if you're not taking every thought captive. At the lowest point of my food addiction, when I wanted to feed the addiction without Sarah knowing, I stooped so low as starting to eat food out of the trash. And you don't ever feel like you could get that far. I mean, like if you're talking about like an alcoholic or a drug addict, you don't feel like you could end up shooting up in an alleyway
Right.
or
selling your
like,
body to get
Right.
or
more
selling
drugs.
somebody on the street somewhere. For a food addict, I don't know if you can get much lower than eating food out of the trash, but I had mapped out every single gas station along the major road that I live on, and I knew at what time each gas station threw away all their hot dogs off their
Really?
That's wild.
That is wild. I didn't even
And
know that they did that.
so I know this Circle K would throw away their hot dogs at 8 p.m. And the shame to walk in, find an excuse to leave the house and walk in at 8 p.m., wait till they're distracted and digging through their trash to get old trash can hot dogs, and then go to the next gas station. All along the road, getting gas station hot dogs and just literally shoving them in my pockets. My God was my stomach, my destiny was destruction. I know it sounds disgusting, and I'm not ashamed anymore because everything's in the light. There is no shame anymore. God doesn't use shame. The enemy was using shame.
let let me ask you at this point, just like, did you already know, like, had you already heard that, Romans 8:1, therefore there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus? Or was that coming later? Because
Yeah.
shame does drive addiction. Like, that's what keeps you trapped in the cycle of addiction. Or was it more like
Yep.
your identity was still in just pleasing Sarah instead of recognizing God?
That is a really good question. I'd read Romans 8. I had felt shame from Sarah. I still heard lies from the enemy in my own head. So Romans 8:1 wasn't sinking in. And the lie I heard, particularly with trash food, was that no one will ever find out. There's no paper trail and no one will ever find out. But your question, it does go deeper, because I did feel shame from Sarah. Sarah is so healthy, and she's such a health professional, but she has been so concerned for my health our whole marriage. And she's watched me kill myself with food, and she watched it lead to a heart attack that often she has unintentionally made comments in our marriage that came off as shaming. And she's asked for forgiveness for that. And those were unintentional. And I know she was trying to save my life. She literally did save my life as she drove me to the hospital while I was having a heart attack.
I just can't imagine how lonely you were. Like, I'm listening to this story and I'm just thinking, wow, how lonely you must have felt.
Yeah, it was lonely, it was shame, and it was panic. It is lonely. Like I felt like I was the only person in the world who would ever stoop that
I
low.
really think that's a lie that Satan tells a lot is you're the only one. Like
Yeah.
no one can understand what you're going through. That's a big lie.
Because then we
that he
don't talk
tells.
about it.
No one's going to be able to understand.
So like I felt lonely and dirty, and no one would ever stoop this low. But then once I had the food, there was so much shame that I would eat it like in desperation, like panic, like a rat, like shoving it in my mouth, not only so Sarah would not catch me or no one would catch me, but like it was my last meal. I barely chewed the food, just like swallowing it. And in desperation, like a man at the end of his pitiful rope, like this was my last meal. So it was lonely and it was desperation and panic.
I want to point something out, just since we're on this right now, is when we come to understand our identity in Christ, we know that the Holy Spirit lives in us. That means that we have full access to the fruits of the Spirit, which are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And our old way of thinking was these are things I need to pray for, instead of having the mindset that these are things I already have.
Have them.
That's right.
However, that being said, we come to understand our identity in Christ, and now we're shifting that mindset. Okay, well, if I have God's peace that surpasses all understanding, then why, when my son just fell off out of the tree, am I getting sucked into all this fear that he's going to die and thinking about the worst case scenario? And I think it's important to recognize that in our deception, like whatever area of our life that really needed more refining, like some of us came out of fear. Like when Jesus changed our lives and spoke truth over us, historically, the patterns that were formed, our old patterns, were of fear. So peace is not gonna always be easy. It's gonna be an area that needs more refining than, say, someone who never really struggled with fear, but they always struggled a lot with self-control. Because what you're saying is your wife, she already had a really good understanding of what God's self-control looked like, and she was able to walk it out. But then she is needing to grow more in the area of understanding peace, that his peace lives in her, and she doesn't have to fear for her husband, that in Christ she can walk out that peace, but that means letting go of control, right? So it's like
Right.
you might find out, hey, you have full access to the Creator's self-control, perfect self-control. But if you've never exercised that by the age of 36, that means for 36 years, you never really practiced any self-control, then you're going to have a learning curve, right? Like you're going to have to learn, what does this look like from Jesus's perspective in application to my life? And it's going to look different for everybody. So anyways, I just wanted to point that out for the listeners.
Yeah. Thank you so much for pointing that out. One of the most powerful parts of Sarah's story on her DTL podcast with Rich was the fact that she had no peace even after God had saved me from a heart attack. She watched the miracle, and she came up to Rich in Denver and she's like, I can't get over the fact that Russell almost died. Like, I can't deal with this death thing. Like, I can't, like, she was watching every drop of oil that I ate. She's like, my faith would have died with Russell. I have no peace, Rich. And there's Russell alive next to me. I have no peace. I have no peace. My faith would have died with Russell. And Rich just hit her right between the eyes when he said, oh, then your faith was never in God. It was in Russell.
Ooh.
Boom. Like, It's like,
Spicy.
and, and she just wept and she just wept and cried. And she's like, wow, I've never had my own faith. I've never had my own peace. And since Rich said that, she was free to walk out her own faith. And for the next 16 months, literally from that moment, she watched me killing myself with my addiction. Because from that moment on, I had just been delivered from a heart attack. It was weeks after that she got freed from that lack of faith and that lack of peace and fear and control. And she just sat back and trusted God. And she watched me slip into a worse addiction than I even had even before the heart attack. I got even more unhealthy than I was before the heart attack. So it was another almost year and a half toiling with the addiction on my own, listening to lies from the enemy, hiding the addiction from my wife, hiding it from the world. But I wasn't really hiding it because now I was more unhealthy than.
Right. It's taking a toll on your body. You were gaining weight.
Yeah.
And
Now I was up to 280.
wow.
Heavier than I was ever before the heart attack. And now we were set to go back to Mexico, back to an all-inclusive resort,
Oh, really?
back for our 10-year anniversary, back to a buffet.
Oh,
And I was at my heaviest weight of my entire life. And I was consumed by my addiction. And that's where God was going to just bring it all into the light. That's where he was just going to let all the lies that I was hearing in my head, because the lies of eating trash food were not the worst lies at this point.
right.
The lies of hiding food from Sarah were not the worst lies. The worst lies that he was telling me in my head were about to come to light for our 10-year anniversary in Mexico. Still, Sarah had peace. Sarah was not trying to control the situation. Sarah had no fear. She had peace. She was walking in freedom. She was trusting God and remaining faithful to him. And she knew God had delivered me from a heart attack and delivered her from fear and anxiety and had given her peace. But in Mexico, the deepest and darkest lie that Satan had been planting in my head was about to come into the light. So we had taken pictures on the vacation because my wife loves to take pictures, as everyone does on vacation. She loves to document it. And the painful, honest truth that whether I was in a swimsuit or in dress clothes out to eat or whatever, I hated the way I looked. So for a year and a half or 2 years, I had not taken any pictures of myself or posted any pictures. I was not in any pictures while this food addiction was running rampant. I was avoiding pictures. I was just taking pictures of my kid, posting those. But she had taken some of us and she had posted them, and I just hated the way I looked. And when I saw that she had posted them, it was like, I don't know if it was all the darkness inside that was coming into the light or just demons just welling up or just anger. But I was like, how could you post those? Like I just blew up on anger, and it was rage more than anger.
Wow. Rage. Yeah.
And on our 10-year anniversary, I just blew up on her. Like, how could you out me? How could you reveal what I look like to the world? Like, how could you do this? And it was like slipping through my fingertips, the lies and the deception that I was hiding, all the food I was hiding around the house and all the trash food and everything was coming into the light in those pictures. And I was like, take those down immediately. I was like, how could you do that? And all she said, quietly and calmly, not accusatory, she just said, well, this is reality. This is reality. And I was livid and I stewed on that all night. I didn't sleep that night. And I just stewed and brewed over that. And I was like prepared to just launch a full-blown attack on our anniversary the next morning. I was up ready and waiting to attack. God turned it actually into something different, because of course my pride was wounded, but really it was all the lies and deception were slipping through my fingertips and everything was coming into the light. But instead of an attack, it turned into this admission, this confession. Yes, this confession. I just blurted out, Sarah, you don't know how hard this has been. For the last year and a half, you don't know the lies that I've heard in my head. And I just went straight to the worst lie that I was hearing in my head from the enemy. I was hearing audibly, just eat whatever you want, eat yourself to death. You'll have a second heart attack and this one will kill you. And you'll be free from your addiction. Finally, I heard it audibly in my head every day.
So evil.
That's direct.
Man, that's so evil. It just breaks my heart.
I know that's from the enemy. I was actually praying for a second heart attack because I'd hear it so much. I would think, man, I could eat whatever I wanted, and maybe this time I would have a heart attack, and this time it would kill me, and I would finally be free of this food addiction that's just so hard and that's killing me. I don't know how many times I thought it out. I thought of it in my head, but I had never spoken it out loud. And I finally spoke it out loud to Sarah, and she just wept. She just wept. That was such a horrible lie from the enemy. That's why it's so imperative that we take every thought captive, like 2 Corinthians says, to not listen to those lies from the enemy, because I heard it every day. When you're drowning in addiction, you hear a lie that says, it'd be just so much easier if I was dead, so I wouldn't have to deal with this addiction. And then I'd be free of it. And God is saying there is a better way to be free of it. God says, I can set you free of it.
I really want to just hover on this for a minute, because I think it's literally the groundbreaking information I know that changed my life personally, is recognizing, oh, there's another voice. I always knew that the enemy could tempt me, but I actually did not understand in growing up in church, and I always believed in Jesus. I guess nobody explained that there are intrusive thoughts that Satan can put in our minds. I often, before the Lord changed my life, would hear the thought, you should just kill yourself. Like, your life is so worthless.
Mm-hmm.
You should just kill yourself. And I do think that the enemy wants us all to die. Like, that's what he loves to do. He loves death, destruction. And so it's so important to know, if you're having these thoughts that are so bad about yourself, they're not your own thoughts. Like, the enemy is saying that garbage to you. The Lord would never talk to you through shame and condemnation. He speaks through the fruits of the Spirit, through love and joy. He wants only good for your life. He wants only to help you. So anything opposite of that is coming from the enemy.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking when people believe that garbage, because it does lead to horrible things like addiction and divorce and murder even, right? Like, the more we come into agreement with his lies, the more evidence there is of sin in our lives.
There's another voice.
There's a better voice.
There's a voice of truth.
It's so important. Absolutely. It's so important to understand that there are three voices that we potentially can hear. And when we take the enemy's voice and say, oh, that's my voice, then you actually think that you think that about yourself, because you had been convinced that you actually wanted to die. And I can also relate with that so much. Like in my own story, there was multiple times that the enemy told me that I would be better off not around. And then that was when I would get into drugs and alcohol and men and all those things. And it's because I believed that I actually did not want to be alive.
It's such a lie. And
I know it's not our thoughts.
it's not ours. If it's shame, if it's guilt, if it's condemnation, it's not ours and it's not God's. And it's literally, it's the enemy wanting us dead. How could God ever say, eat yourself to death? Like, how could God ever say, you're better off dead? My wife was 30 weeks pregnant and we had a 2-year-old boy at home.
Yeah.
There's no way that's ever from God or from me.
And I just see this played out so beautifully because the enemy knew that your wife struggled with fear and he knew that you struggled with food. And that if you guys weren't living in the freedom that we have in Christ, that you would isolate and pin one another against each other. Because, you know, she would speak in love and it would come out as shame. And then, you know, you would feel shamed and isolate. And the enemy does not want unity. He does not want marriages to go well. He does not want friendships to go well. And so it's just so beautiful, God's truth and what he did in your marriage, because instead of isolation like you guys had for years, it drew you together. And she was healed from her fear and you were healed from your food addiction.
In that moment where you're like, how dare you post my picture on the internet? Now everybody knows my secret sin, right? Which is it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like Adam and Eve in the garden, like Michaela said, like we're naked and he's like, who told you you're naked? And they're exposed. It's just so ridiculous. But what's so beautiful is your wife in that moment, God had already freed her from fear. And if she had still been in her fear, she might not have spoke truth over you at that moment of it's the truth.
It would have gotten worse.
Right? Because a lot of times with our spouse or a close relationship, if we have a lot of fear, it's like, well, I don't want to tell them the truth because I don't want to hurt them. But in that moment, the Lord used her to be like, it is real. Jesus used that to just wake you up, to open your eyes, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like we can't just erase you from your existence. Like there's going to be photos of you. We can't just like blur you out.
That's so good. Yeah, that gives me chills. I hadn't even thought about that God used her in that moment. She was walking in freedom, like no fear.
Praise God.
And she spoke truth out of freedom, no fear, no anxiety. She had peace in posting those pictures. And you know what? God brought things into the light, out of the dark into the light because of that post. And I use those pictures as my before and after now.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. And they're the before and after now. So I post them with no shame.
Amen.
That's so
everything
great.
in the light now.
So yeah, so finish your story. In this moment, your eyes were opened, and this is where it all came to a head, right? This is where you laid it down at Jesus' feet.
Yeah, and she just wept, and I realized it was a lie. And she's 30 weeks pregnant, and she's hearing that her husband wants to die from this food addiction, but that was a lie. I didn't really want to die.
No.
Especially after he delivered me from a heart attack. I was praying for a second heart attack. That is a lie. Like, we had a 2-year-old boy at home and a little girl coming soon. And I knew that just broke her heart. So I knew I needed help. I reached out. I tried a new diet, a lifestyle change, and the program was so expensive. It was $400 a month for food that we couldn't afford. And it was more food and more books and all this stuff that I was bitter and angry about it because the food didn't taste good and it wasn't dealing with my addiction. It was
a Band-Aid.
It was a Band-Aid. Thank you. It was a Band-Aid. And I was reading about this food that was supposedly trying to help me, this Band-Aid, but a lot of it was processed. And I wasn't ready to let go of the food that I loved so much, the food that was killing me. And I saw some good results from the program. I lost 15 pounds again, and then I just slipped straight back into the food
man.
addiction.
Because the root was still there.
Yep.
But you recognize the lie. You recognize the lie that you didn't want to die. That you, in that moment, you recognize that was a lie, but you didn't yet know and understand that God had the power to free you from that.
Exactly. I recognized I was hearing a lie that I was no longer going to listen to. I'm going to eat myself to death, but I just couldn't break the food addiction. I was cheating again, just going back to fast food again. And I could see it even after our baby girl was born. The food addiction snuck its way back in, even in the hospital, because there was free food in the hospital, in the refrigerator, in the baby unit for families. And I just hoarded food, like scarcity mindset again. What came home with after our baby girl was a whole backpack full of free food. And then life got just stressful and in general more complicated with a toddler and a baby. And I started hiding food again. And then I went back to previous patterns of dealing with stress with food. So there was coping mechanisms and scarcity. So I'm not listening to the lie of wanting to kill myself with food or anything, that those lies, but there's still previous patterns that I would go to, that I always went to with food. And then I was hiding food again. And then the new lie that came into my head was that, man, I'm never going to be free of this food addiction. And then I heard a bold-faced lie that God was never going to use my testimony if I didn't get healthy. And I was like, if I'm not healthy, then I can't get up and tell people about my heart attack and share my testimony because it won't have as much of an impact if I'm not healthy. And I was telling everyone I met about my heart attack. So that was a bold-faced lie. I was telling people in Walmart, in the grocery store, I was telling everyone. So I started to voice that lie. Everyone said, Russell, you tell everyone you meet your testimony. It doesn't matter how much you weigh. Like, your testimony is powerful. So you need to curb that lie real fast.
Absolutely. The testimony of Jesus is what we have. Like,
yes,
the enemy wanted the testimony so bad.
Yes.
And he thought that he was going to get you, but
you will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. So
the word of their testimony.
I never stopped sharing of his goodness. So looking back, I know that even though I was unhealthy, he was still using my testimony for his good and for his glory every step of the way.
Absolutely.
So during this backsliding, it was brief. I watched a friend of mine who's an alcoholic completely surrender his alcoholism over to God. And in March of 2023, we celebrated his 1 year of sobriety. And I just flat out asked him, how did you do it? How did you surrender? How did you give it up? I can't quite give up my food addiction. And he said something so simple. He said, I just completely surrendered it to God. And he said, I really let it go. And kind of like what you and I were talking about, Michaela, like, you stop trying to take it back out of God's hands. You stop trying to pick it back up. He said he finally let it go. And when he did let it go, he actually meant it. And he stopped trying to hold on and grasp and pick it back up and take it out of God's hands. And so I began to ponder to myself in March of 2023, I wonder if I could do that with my food addiction. So in April of 2023, almost a year ago, I was sitting in a hot tub and I prayed a radical prayer. I decided to completely surrender my food addiction over to God. Every other time I tried to surrender it, I didn't really mean it. I never really let it go. I always would think instantly after I prayed, I said, but I still am going to eat what I want to eat. I'm still going to eat the good food. I would instantly have a thought, but I'm still going to eat fast food. I'm still going to eat the stuff I want to. and I would pray it and then kind of take it back from God. And this time I didn't. I surrendered it and I completely let it go. This was different. This is what I said. I said, I am headed for a second heart attack. I was eating fast food. I used to tell Sarah I was going to the hot tub, but I would get fast food on my way to the hot tub. So
Can I just say that I'm pretty sure Sarah knew
the whole time
that you were eating all the time? It was so funny. It's like little kids are like, you're like playing hide and go seek with your 4-year-old, and like literally they just walk and hide behind the couch and you see where they hide. And it's like, I saw you. I saw you go behind the couch. I know where you're at. I think this is ridiculous.
And it's like, why try to hide like what Adam and Eve did? Why try to hide from God? When you said that, that made me think of something. When I was digging food out of the trash, why try to hide that from God? What God is trying to say, this is not my best for you, Russell. I have something so much better for you than trash food. I think of it as maybe how we look at our kids. If Sully, my kid, was eating food out of the trash, I wouldn't shame him. He wouldn't have to feel guilty or shame for that, but I would say, Sully, the trash is not where we get our food, but you don't hide that I have something so much better for you. But there, like you said, why did I try to hide it from Sarah? She knew. Why would I try to hide anything from God? She knew. And not only did he know, but he has something so much better.
Amen.
Anyway, that radical prayer, I said, I'm eating fast food in the hot tub. I'm headed for a second heart attack, but this is different. This time, I don't want a second heart attack. Like the enemy was trying to tell me to have a second heart attack, to kill myself. This time, I don't want a second heart attack. My baby girl is born. I want to be free like my friend was free from alcoholism.
Yes.
I want to be free of this addiction and free indeed. I want to be free the way God wants me to be free, not the way the enemy wanted me to be free in death. I want to be free in life. I want to be free in abundance. So I said, God, I know you can give me freedom that is in Christ alone. When the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. So I said, this is killing me, and I know you're not done with me yet. So take this food addiction from me. And I said, take my cravings, take my appetite, take my affinity for free food. I have a trigger for free food. Take my affinity for fast food and unhealthy food and sugary food and all of it. I fully surrender it completely to you, and I will no longer be bound by the chains of addiction that I have been a slave to for 14 years of my life. I surrender it, and I will not listen to the lies of the enemy. I give it over to you completely, God, in the name of Jesus. Amen. And the next day I went to Chick-fil-A. The next day I went to Chick-fil-A. I can't believe it because I had just prayed that prayer, but I still went to fast food.
Right.
I'm like, like
here I am getting mini chicken biscuits.
I don't know if I was testing it or what, but I was going to fast food every day for 3 meals a day, but I had to go. And I got my decadent, fatty, unhealthy order that I always get with extra cheese and extra chicken and add bacon and extra sauce. And I took one bite and it was too much for me. But for me, the foodie, the fatty,
That's wild.
For me, for one bite, it was too decadent, too much for me.
Crazy.
I knew that God had answered my prayer in an instant, in a split second, but I had to test it one more bite took a second bite, and I was full. I was done.
Wow.
Done.
I was done.
That is
So
so
he had
good.
taken
Hallelujah.
He's so good. He's so good. He had taken my appetite and my cravings away. He had answered my prayer exactly as how I had prayed it in an instant. And I know he doesn't do that for everyone. And it's not always a flash of a miracle. And it wasn't that way for me, because I want to unpack how it happened to kind of answer more of your question, Michaela. But in a flash, the way it happened in a flash was a mindset change and a heart change.
Mm.
I say he saved my
Mhm.
heart after the heart attack, but that was easy. That was in an instant. This one took 14 years. It was a change of heart, but then came the journey. Okay. So I prayed that miracle, and then I lost 20 pounds in a month because he had taken away my appetite and my cravings and
Wow.
my addiction. But I will tell you, I was still going to fast food every day because that addiction was so strong. But he was breaking me down one step at a time, as because I had given it over completely to him. So the cravings, the appetite was gone. I was getting full after a few bites. And this was on no drugs, nothing. This was on the Holy Spirit. And 20 pounds came off so easily because I was eating so much less, but I was still eating crap,
Right.
horrible stuff. And I was getting full so easily. I had more leftovers in the fridge than I knew what to do with. And I wasn't hiding them in the garage or in the basement or under the
Hallelujah.
couch.
That's the miracle. No more hiding.
Yeah, no more hiding. And I knew I was finally free of my addiction, and I was walking in freedom. I was walking in the light. There was no more shame, but I knew God had to take me one step further. So I was like, God, what's the next step? Reveal it to me. Reveal it to me. And so God started to peel back the layers of my addiction. And he literally, the first thing he revealed to me was, Russell, what you're eating is so horrible for you. And I started researching all the chemicals in the fast food that I was eating, all the additives. And additives are just addictive, minus the C. I was going every day because I started to research what was in one burrito at Taco Bell, and one item at McDonald's was a list this long is not food. And I was eating there every day because it's full of addictive chemicals. It was making me come back. And the one I was most addicted to was Chick-fil-A. And I was so addicted because it's full of additives that make you addicted, make you keep coming back.
Wow.
And so
That's so
I cut
interesting.
out.
It's definitely not the Lord's chicken then.
Yeah. That's why I was like an alcoholic or a drug addict. But I was so far that I was going every day for 3 meals a day. So I cut out fast food for 7 months, 7 months straight. And I was losing more weight than I had ever thought possible.
Wow.
But then I started to surrender more. I said, God, please reveal more. Like, this has to be by your will and your power, not by my will, not by my power. And peel back more layers, God, peel back more layers. And I didn't know it was happening to me. Like, I knew it was him. I knew it wasn't me. And like when it first started happening to me, I texted Sarah. It's like, I think I'm sick. I think I have cancer or something. Like, I don't know what's happening to me because I'm not hungry. I wasn't taking any of the new drugs like Ozempic or Mounjaro or anything like this, like that suppress your hunger. It was the Holy Spirit doing it. It was the prayer I prayed, but then God was revealing to me all the horrible food that I was eating. And then the next layer he peeled back was Matthew 6, my favorite chapter in the Bible, because I had so much anxiety and depression growing up. But I always focused on Matthew 6:34 because of my anxiety. I always focused on do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. But then right a few verses above it, I was reading in my devotions, and it just brought me to tears. Do not worry about what you will eat
Mm.
or what you will drink.
Mhm.
And God spoke directly to my heart.
Wow.
Because through my whole addiction, I always thought about my next meal, my next fix. At night, after dinner, I'd lay in bed thinking about what I was going to eat for breakfast. And after breakfast, I was thinking about what I'd eat for lunch. After lunch, I was thinking about what I'd eat for dinner. And that verse instantly penetrated my heart to say, God knows what I need. And if I seek him first and his righteousness, seeking him completely, he will provide everything I need. I don't need my next fix. I don't need to worry. It's again about trusting him, about not fearing. So it went back to how food addiction started was scarcity mindset. I don't need to worry about my next meal, my next fix. Or it goes back to how I coped with stress. I don't need to use food to cope with stress. I don't need to use food for anything, for God knows what I need and he will provide it if I just seek him and seek his righteousness. He will provide all that I need. It just came down to trusting him.
Mhm.
But then I said, God, peel back another layer. I was still getting my next fix.
Okay.
I had avoided fast food for 7 months,
Okay.
but I was still going to Chick-fil-A every day
Wow. Wow.
for lemonade.
Oh, for lemonade.
For lemonade. Yeah.
Oh.
I was like, I'm just getting a nice drink every day. And I said, God, peel back the next layer. So he literally spoke to me, and I knew this was God's voice. He said, Russell, just do a little research of how many grams of sugar are in that large lemonade you're drinking. And it was 75 grams of sugar, and I'd get a refill. And I'd get a refill every day. So that was 150 grams of sugar. I was getting it every day. That was my fix. That was still feeding my addiction. And so I cut that out, and I said, God, peel back the next layer. And he helped me avoid the center aisles of the grocery store, which is what Sarah would always tell me to avoid chips and cookies and stay on the outer edge. And then I said, God, peel back the next layer. And he helped me get back in the gym to working out and back to playing basketball. And it was this compounding effect. And Sarah helped me along the way, and God helped me along the way, and he's still helping me along the way. And it's been 55 pounds lost, and all the glory goes to God.
Yes.
All of it.
Amen.
Like all the glory. My appetite, my cravings are not in control anymore. I'm free from my food addiction.
Mm.
I'm walking in that freedom because Christ has set me free. There's no more deception with my wife. Everything is in the light.
Mm.
That's just what God does because he loves us.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh man, this is so good. It makes me think about just addiction in general. Like the purpose of Worthy of Everything is to talk about intimacy with God and how he fathers us when we come to Christ. Like he's with us every second of the day, the same way that I have 3 sons and I watch over, I know every little thing they're doing. The enemy wants to separate that. He wants to speak lies about God. He wants to speak lies about who we are in Christ and the power we've been given through the Holy Spirit. And he tricked you into living with this scarcity mindset. And it's so interesting. Like addiction is driven by lies. If you're listening to this and you have some addiction popping into your head, you have to understand that you are being lied to. It's so important, even if you're in Jesus Christ. If sin is controlling your life, then there's something that you're missing in the truth of what God says about you. For example, with pornography addiction, there's lies about what intimacy was meant to be. God created all these good things, pleasure for us. He's the one that invented the dopamine hit that we get in our brains, the serotonin, the oxytocin, all these good things in the brain. They were created by our Father. He wanted us to have pleasure and good things, and Satan will always seek to distort what God meant for good. And so he gave us the beautiful pleasure of eating delicious food. He intentionally planned for us to be able to enjoy food. And yet the enemy has distorted that. And he'll come and say, you need more. You need to eat so much. And then it corrupts the body. It corrupts the chemicals, the chemical that tells you you're full. It distorts the message from the stomach to the brain, and it messes these things up. And then you find yourself feeling bad about yourself because you've gained all this weight. And now, if my identity is not firm in Jesus Christ and it's in the way I look, in the way that people are looking at me, then that just adds another layer of deception. And what can we do?
Yeah.
How do we solve this? You have to know that even if your lie isn't the same as Russ, you were living with the scarcity mindset, but fear can drive people to addiction. Like, I got to drown out the lies. I don't want to be afraid. So I'm just going to get drunk so I don't have to hear all this garbage in my head. And what we're saying here is that the Holy Spirit can free you from those lies. He can set you free. He can tell you what lies are driving you back to addiction and set you free, because he has given us the power through the Holy Spirit to live free from sin, which is what we've been set free from in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, the power is within us because Christ lives within us. I always say it was not by my willpower, but by his will and by his power. There's something really important that I want to share with anyone who's listening, though, that I have stumbled, because this addiction is so similar to alcoholism and drugs, but so different that in that everyone has to eat.
You can't just cut it out. That's right.
Yeah. And so I went 7-8 months without fast food.
Okay.
And then 3 or 4 months ago, I went to Popeyes and got some fried chicken, and the dopamine hit, the rush, that fried chicken hit me. And I went 4 days in a row. I went 4 days straight, and I fell, and I have fallen in the last few months, admittedly, and I started to hear the lies in my head.
Wow.
But I have taken every thought captive,
Yes.
and I have never heard you're going to eat yourself to death, ever. Rich uses this beautiful analogy that I've stolen from him and told tons of people. He pictures the lie as a thought bubble. I don't know if you've heard this from him.
I haven't.
He pictures it as a thought
if you
bubble.
don't, he's referring to a friend we all have in common.
Yeah, my friend Rich, I went to college with him at Union. He says, I picture the lie as a thought bubble. It comes into my head. I hold that thought bubble captive in my head, and I ask myself, is that my thought? Is it God's? Is it the enemy? I hold it in my head. If it is from the enemy, I literally just watch. I picture that thought bubble just pass right on through my head.
Yes.
I just float on by. And I've seen those thoughts come in my head, and I make them obedient to Christ. And I quickly dismiss them and let them pass on by. So when I do stumble, because I have eaten fast food, I'm free of this addiction. I'm walking in freedom, but I'm not free of fast food. It's so hard to just cut it out of your life completely. So when I stumble, I just simply get back up and I continue walking in my newness of life. I am a new person. The old Russell who was killing himself is dead and gone.
That's right.
That's right.
I just keep walking in my freedom with Christ at the center of my life. He's first place in my heart. The reason I know that is because food is not first place in my heart. When I get fast food, I get one thing, and even though the dopamine rush hits, I'm like, ah, man, that food, that doesn't have claim over me anymore. That is really good, but I know it's really bad for me, and I'm not going to keep walking in the flesh.
Mhm.
That's the old Russell. I'm not going to live in deception. I'm not going to head for death, and I'm not going to be killing myself. I'm still able to deny the flesh, and it's not the way you would think. It's the way I have found. The best way to deny the flesh is to feed the spirit.
Mhm.
So I just run to the spirit and feed the spirit. That's the best way I've found to deal with my food addiction. And instead of starving the flesh, just feed the spirit. That's the best way to starve the flesh, is feed the spirit. And in that way, I've found the enemy just has no claim and no territory, no rights in my mind anymore. I'm done living a life that I was not created for. I'm finally free of food addiction, and my freedom is in Christ.
Hallelujah. Wow. Well, we are so grateful, Russ,
so
for you taking the time, and we have lots to think about and pray over. Michaela and I.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah.
It's always a blessing to share.
Amen. Hey guys, I just wanted to really quick tell you that if you do want to listen to Mr. Russ Palmer's full testimony of how his life was completely transformed by the gospel of Jesus, you can go to Death to Life with our friend Richard Young, and his episode is number 50 with his wife Sarah. Blessings.